It's midnight at the movies again with RickRamos and myself, Ibrahim Chavez. Tonight it's midnight in the world of symbols and allegory, on the fool's journey of the Tarot, on the ascent of the tower, Jodorowsky's Holy Mountain. An art film, it's a ritual, it's an initiation, it's something of an occult manifesto from the mad and enlightened mind of the director who had already brought us another film that we discussed, another midnight film, another midnight, El Topo. The Holy Mountain, what it does is it uses occult alchemical concepts of personal transformation while at the same time offering critiques of history, religion, and contemporary corporate society of a contemporary corporate society that's fueled by and profits from war, consumerism, commodity fetishism, and the exploitation of the workforce. So the film has this dual nature to it, so that it's at once personal but also societal. It's spiritual, but it's also political. It's strange, but it's recognizable. And overall, it's part of a 60s and 70s occult revival, but it's also critical of the pitfalls of that. And it's mad, it's insane, but it makes sense. It makes sense to me. And we're going to see, Rick, if it makes any sense to you.
I think a lot of it makes sense, and I think a lot of it is on point. I just don't necessarily love the delivery of this one, and I'm coming from really falling in love with both El Topo and Santa Sangre, which I thought were masterpieces. I really thought both of those films were incredible. And I went into this watching it last night thinking that I had already seen it. And maybe I'd seen clips of it, but I quickly realized that this is not a film that I had seen because I don't imagine, I don't think you can watch this film and forget it. You know what I mean? And I'm not
We
saying
try.
that in a bad way. I'm not saying that it I'm not saying that it's a bad film in the traditional sense of a bad film. I just said what I'm saying is that for me at least, when you fall in love with something, especially an artist, the dissatisfaction with the work is more pronounced than it would be with someone who you just think is a mediocre filmmaker, that somebody might surprise you, or oh, here's Spielberg being Spielberg again, or here's Scorsese with another um look at crime, or the existential nature of religion, and um the destructive nature of the soul. There's that. When you look at this, is more akin to being disappointed with Terrence Malick with a film that he did about a decade ago called King of Cups, a film that I really, really disliked because I thought it was self-absorbed and just completely lacking in a connection. I can't say the same thing about the Holy Mountain. There are moments in the Holy Mountain that are just brilliant, and I think it's impossible. I think it would be impossible for Jodorowsky to make a film that doesn't grab a hold of your mind and your soul, and force reactions of some sort. But it's not necessarily one that I thought was, in this case, as as profound as he wanted it to be. So, to some degree, it seemed a rather obvious look at the spiritual nature of our being, and the the connection between religious thought, um, physical existence, the earth, and such. Now, admittedly, I do not come to this film with the religious background that would inform it in such a way. I see the obvious Jesus allusion. I see the obvious crucifixion and a certain moment of would the rose growing out of the hand be considered stigmata, or that's only the forehead scar bleeding thing. I'm not sure, but what is there is fascinating, and yet it doesn't have the same power of an El Topo or a Santa Sangre, which I think the problem is, and I've said this in the past. It's I don't know if it's necessarily fair to compare a director's work to his previous work as far as should a film stand alone as its own thing, or should it be a growth from something else? All I can say is this film didn't work for me in the same way that those two films did. But it's you're talking about two films that I consider masterpieces and one that I just consider interesting.
Yeah, I mean that in and of itself is interesting.
Yeah.
The because he uses it's a lot of surrealism. It's a lot of juxtaposing two things that normally you wouldn't necessarily take together.
Yeah.
I think one of the images get blurred, but actually we saw this film together.
Did we see this film?
We saw it in the theater. We saw it at the Independent.
See, I couldn't
Years
remember
ago.
if we saw this or if we saw El Topo, because I thought we saw El Topo at the theater.
No,
Huh, that's interesting.
I'm pretty sure it was this.
Okay.
And it's something that I had already seen, but it had been years since I saw it. When I saw it with you at the theater, it was your first time seeing it, and for me, it had been years since I had seen it. El Topo is the one that I had seen more of, and El Topo was actually the first one I saw of him.
Yeah.
And then we came to this, and then now we're getting a chance to talk about it. It's he uses he tends to use a lot of circus, like so-called like freak aesthetic.
Yeah, he's a modern Todd Browning, or at least a 70s Todd Browning, you could say.
Yeah, I mean with a Latin American feel. And a lot of bright colors, a lot of rich symbols. There are different worlds in this film. There's first world, which is very much like a stand-in of it's like Mexico City, but it can be any kind of Latin American environment. There's the bright colors and rich symbols of like the ritual world or the ritual realm. There's a lot of interesting like modern it's like late modernist with some retrofuturism and some like pop art set design that happened in like the industrial world, and we'll get into like this basically what the story of the film is. There's a lot of nature and ruins, like Mexican archaeological sites. So he's using a lot of different environments to create this overall fever dream assault on the viewer. El Topo is a little bit more contained. It's a little bit smaller, and Santa Sangre even more so. Santa Sangre is more. easily digestible. This is more on a grand scale. This
Yeah.
is like this is basically his epic. And I think that it's easier to understand than it seems. Someone watching it is going to really be assaulted by all these symbols, all these meanings, all of these references. Some will be recognizable. Some will be Christ figure. Okay, I can grasp onto that. You know what I mean? Like for the average so-called Western viewer, they're gonna grab a hold of that. Even the shit that you don't understand, you'll be able to understand as, oh, this is some kind of ritual. This is some kind of something. And we can place that still now we can place it within the context of the hero's journey, basically. You can say, I mean, in this case, it's the fool's journey, which I'll get into, but you can say, okay, there's a hero, he's on a quest, he meets a teacher. Okay, so all this ritual stuff is happening within the context of Yoda teaching Luke Skywalker how to use magic, which in the world of Star Wars, it's the Force, which is that energy, the thing that lives in everything. It's the Tao, it's the Chi, it's the whatever.
Yeah.
But for all intents and purposes, it's fucking magic, right? So it's Harry Potter being taught by masters how to use magic. Then that character has to go on these trials. They face adversity. Ultimately, they face, Joseph Campbell says that it's the father for Luke Skywalker. Fucking spoiler alert, it is the father. Ultimately, it's though the person is facing himself, him or herself, and then they achieve some form of enlightenment, or they get the treasure, or they get whatever, and then they must return to the world after. That's in this as well. And so the esoteric inner elements of the film, although they don't need to be understood, they undergird the meaning of with this occult context. They add specificity and nuance, but you can still say, oh, it's at the very least, someone is going to say, oh, it's some fucking crazy, weird movie about this like dude who looks like Jesus, who he walks around with a statue of Jesus, and then he's followed by some prostitutes, and one prostitute is like holding a chimpanzee's hand, and they're following him, and then he climbs a tower, and then once he climbs the tower, he's in a tunnel, and then he breaks through like this sheet that's covering one of the ends of the tunnel, and then he crosses a giant room that's painted like a rainbow, and then he meets a wizard, and the wizard makes him shit in a jar, and then once he shits in the jar, the wizard turns his shit into gold, and then the wizard is like, you need to go on this journey, but you have to get over like yourself, how you experience yourself, or your ego, or whatever. Now you're going to go on this journey with a bunch of different technocratic war criminals who are the richest people in the world, that each represented by a planet. And I'm going to show you their existence in these like little vignettes that describe them. And then we're all going to like go to the holy mountain on this quest. But first you have to burn your money. Everyone shave your head. Okay, now we're going to go. And along the way up that mountain, we're going to go through other initiations with indigenous people. And then some of you are going to get distracted by these false gurus at the foot of the mountain. And then once we get to the top of the mountain, you don't need me anymore. So cut off my head, and go up and see that the gurus, the 9 gurus on the mountain, the masters, they're actually mannequins. You yourselves are the gurus. You've achieved your understanding. You've completed the mission. But understand that enlightenment, so to speak, isn't to be had here on the mountain in isolation. It's to be had back in reality in the real world. The end. And so, well, what I'm telling you step by step, image by image, is you're going like, wait, what? Prostitute and chimpanzee? Like, some people are still like, I'm still at the prostitute with the chimpanzee. We haven't talked about, there's a shot with an old man, naked, fully frontally nude old man with the breasts of like cheetah heads or ocelot heads or whatever kind of feline mammal that's like spitting milk like a gargoyle. And you know what I mean? We haven't talked about a bunch of shit because those things I think should be seen.
There's too much shit in this movie to really go. This would be a 4-hour long podcast, go in detail. But then there are images that haunt you. Why? And I know he had, and I'm very much against abuse for the sake of a film, but there is something haunting about the imagery that you get from it. And there is a moment that has stuck with me, and when I saw it in the film, it just it rang back as one of the things that I remember seeing. Like I tell you, I don't. There's a lot about this film that I don't remember, and I'm looking it up in my my log of movies. I saw this with you at the Downtown Independent in 2018, and I think I liked it then, and and don't get me wrong, there are aspects of it that I like about it now, but having seen El Topo and having seen Santa Sangre and looking forward to the Dance of Reality. But I think most important, and I think this is the thing that really elevates watching Jodorowsky's Dune. The point that I'm getting at, and I think I've made this in the past, is that I view Jodorowsky not as somebody who is shocking to be shocking, or he's going out of his way to intimidate an audience or to try to in some way confuse or intimidate them. I really feel that this is a man who wholeheartedly carries himself as the poet. And that's not always going to work. But the poetic image is very powerful in this movie. And scenes of dogs skinned and crucified, that shit is very disturbing. Well, they were lamb. They were lambs?
Yeah.
See, I thought they were. I thought they were like coyotes or something, or dogs, greyhounds.
Those are, and the reason it's worth. I'm glad you bring this up because we've already discussed this in when we talked about the topo. Jodorowsky he's always had controversy about him regarding cruelty to animals in his films. And that question as to whether it actually is cruelty to animals or what it is. And I think there's kind of a parallel to Herzog. So it's not necessarily that Herzog has allegations of cruelty to animals. All I can think of in terms of animals is the stories from the rats for Nosferatu.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the rats for Herzog, it was the scenes of them being released into this square and then them running over people's feet, and apparently the feet are actually Herzog's, and so they bit his ass like multiple times.
Yeah.
And I mean, good, you know.
Yeah.
El Topo actually was episode 385. If any of you want to go back to the archive,
It's a good episode. It's a really fun introduction to him.
But Jodorowsky is not without controversy, and a lot of times you see images of, for example, in this film, it's the crucified bodies of sheep that he got them from a restaurant. He got, like, I guess, a large restaurant or a restaurant distributor or something like that. And because this already came up, and I actually read about this in I have a book called The Transformative Cinema of Alejandro Jodorowsky by George Melnick. And it just talks about, it's a general overview of his work, with like examples of critical or summaries of critical reviews of his shit. And that's one of the things that the author mentions in that book is how that came up. But Jodorowsky, and we talked about it we actually might have talked about the rape stuff, his discussions of rape and his kind of like notions of that. And I know it came up in El Topo, but it might have already also come up in our discussion of Jodorowsky's Dune. But we've talked about how there's a quote where he was like, I rape my film. And there's a clip of him where they're asking about violence. And he's like, I like violence.
You say something about raping the bride. You rape the bride, and you take.
Right.
It's crazy.
And we talked about how he himself is actually the product of rape. And we get into the complexities of that, and how problematic he is, and how the different nuances that can be looked at there, without excuse for it, of course. But this particular sequence that you're talking about is actually, apparently they're sheep that were like borrowed. So I mean, like, you can still make the argument, because ultimately they ended up at restaurants and they ended up as meals. But you can still make an argument to say that, well, and I'm not like a PETA activist or anything like that, but you can still make the argument that even animals that end up as food should be treated with dignity after they're dead, after slaughter. That argument obviously can be made. His counter argument would probably be like, but this is for art, and I don't give a fuck because it's for art. And the impact of the meanings that I'm giving you the benefits outweigh the cost of using the corpse. You know what I mean? Like,
no, I get that. Yeah.
So these are kind of these two sides. But I'm sorry, I cut you off.
No, it was a good thing, because I mean, it leads to a lot of questions about the responsibility of the filmmaker in going to those lengths for either realism, or like realism as with Herzog dragging a fucking steamboat over a mountain and risking untold lives, but also
using indigenous people for his project.
Yeah, Peckinpah shooting the heads off chickens at the beginning of Pat Garrett and the Billy the Kid, or Jodorowsky in this case. There's a dog fight in the film, which
Yes.
I was
Yeah.
uncomfortable with that. I mean, but it's also a personal thing with dogs. So it's what, and when you tell me that those were sheep, as much as I hate to admit it, there was a bit of a sigh of relief knowing that they weren't dogs. That's a hypocritical attitude right then and there. So there's artistically there's a hypocritical question involved in that as well. So I don't know. I don't know where to I don't know really how to process something like that. You relieved me with that statement, and yet you confused me even more with it. Or you forced me to
And
confuse myself, you
all
know?
that. I'm about to relieve and confuse you in a couple minutes.
Yeah.
So, um,
Well, if you can explain to me why I had to watch somebody boil shit for half an hour, then we can really, start to understand something. But
I can. I actually can. That's one that I can. I can, and it's very simple.
okay.
But before, it's because you're shit. You're shit. Um, I will boil you. Um, let's zoom out the way that at the end of the film they reach the pinnacle of their journey, the summit of the mountain, and and I'll return to this, but Jodorowsky says, camera zoom out, and so the cameras, and then you see the camera zoom out. He breaks the fourth wall. He looks right at the audience, right at the camera. He tells the camera to zoom out, and so you see other cameras, and then so you see within this shot now are elements of a crew. So this whole thing has been revealed to be a film. Um, that's part of something broader because what he said, he does use the term Maya, which is a Sanskrit term that you get in Hinduism and in Buddhism and in that Indian worldview, which is the world itself is an illusion. The world as we see it, and this heavily influences like the Matrix. I mean, there's also elements where we'll do the Matrix another time, but a Western version of it is Plato's cave allegory, where if you see shadows, it's these people in this story are chained. They're in a cave and they see shadows moving on the cave wall. You know, the way we see film projection, and we think that's reality, but it's actually just shadows being made by a fire behind, et cetera, et cetera. But let's zoom out. In the mid 60s and 70s, and I'm bringing us into this so we can go in further, is because Jodorowsky is part of this overall milieu that's happening in society, and in different societies, because of translations. And it's also, I mean, like coming out of the late 60s, there are protests all over the world. There's France, 68's heavy with fucking youth and student protests. There's massacres in Mexico that are referenced in here. But specifically like in the US, and Jodorowsky had access to a lot of this stuff because of crossover, and I mean, he was at that point, he's in, well, a little bit later, he's in Mexico doing theater and doing all this shit. In the 50s, you have beat poets, Jack Kerouac, Ginsberg. There's heavily Gary Snyder because he was became the most Buddhist of the poets. They start to introduce Eastern and Buddhist concepts to the U.S. and into popular culture. That's in the 50s, early 60s. You start to get Aldous Huxley, Doors of Perception. Doors of Perception is the Doors band gets their name after that. You get Jungian spiritual archetypal psychology principles getting into kind of popular culture. Um, Alan Watts is writing and speaking about Zen. D.T. Suzuki speaking about Zen Buddhism. Yoga, these different elements are being brought into the so-called West. The Beatles, George Harrison is now the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. You're getting the different elements of Indian religion, Hare Krishna, all that. You get Aleister Crowley on the cover of Sgt. Pepper. You get Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin and his, I don't want to say obsession, but for now let's just say obsession with Aleister Crowley.
Mm-hmm.
The Rolling Stones, the work of Kenneth Anger. Hair, the musical with the song Agent Aquarius. Timothy Leary, LSD. You get the Summer of Love, you get Woodstock, you get Manson, you get these idea of cults. Carlos Castaneda with the teachings of Don Juan, with peyote and all that, like astrology, yoga, self-help therapies. All of this stuff is like happening in the middle of the century in the a little bit after 60s and 70s in the U.S. Jodorowsky's part of this, so he's an artist immersed in these ideas that he's absorbing. He's interested in tarot. He wrote a book on tarot that I where is it? I have it. It's called Way of Tarot: The Spiritual Teacher in the Cards. Thick ass study of tarot that he wrote with Marianne Costa. His own kind of like take on it, built up by an older version. So you have all of this stuff. Age of Aquarius, you get astrology. People are now, like, well, what's your sign and shit like that. Like things that we take for granted now.
Yeah.
They weren't that way. And you're going from conservative 50s into all this other shit, and then sandwiched by the time you get to the 80s, there's a conservative Christian backlash to all of this shit that's saying satanic panic, backmasking, ritual abuse, stuff that we're still seeing the reverberations of now in terms of like Pizzagate, MAGA, all of the conspiracies of MAGA. They're connected. You can practically connect them all, or on some level, back to a response to this occult shit. Okay, so we have that. So what Jodorowsky's really doing with this film is he's interested in astrological symbolism. He's interested in alchemy, and he's interested in the tarot. I mean, he's interested in other shit, but he's really using these elements, these overall esoteric occult elements. Tarot, it starts off 15th century in Italy with Tarocchi. It's a card game. By the 18th century forward, tarot in France, it starts to be associated with symbolism, occult meanings. At its most basic, fortune telling. There are minor cards and the major cards. The major arcana, the zero card is the Fool. And if you look at those face major arcana cards, you can look at them as a journey of spiritual development. And the main character in this film is associated with the Fool card. There's even a shot of it. So the Fool, represented by the number 0, is basically means openness, beginning, naivete, foolishness, but it's just also like youth. Like when you start out as a child, it's almost as if you're a fool. You're just open, flexible, adventurous, curious, but also you don't know what's going on. The Tower card, which in the film he ascends that tower. The Tower card, number 16, it represents institutions, structures, belief systems, modes of being, but also moving beyond them and their collapse. So a lot of this film is about transcending these structures, be they societal or psychological beliefs, moving beyond them. And that involves the depiction of these planetary representations. And that's when you get into astrology or astrological symbolism. And so each of these people that he's taking, that the main character is going to go on the journey with, they're like technocrats and oligarchs and weapons manufacturers. And so all that Jodorowsky's doing is he's taking certain planets, because in alchemy is basically chemistry, symbolic chemistry. So Mars, the symbol, the masculine symbol, which is like the arrow, is a symbol of Mars, but it's also the symbol of iron. So there's a chemical component, there's a mystical component, there's a symbolic component. And so the character represented by Mars is a weapons manufacturer. It makes sense because Mars was, or Ares was, the god of war. And it represents on a societal level the military industrial complex. So all that Jodorowsky's doing is he's listing off these groups that he personifies. Each of them is symbolized by a planet. Venus, you have like instead of a circle with an arrow, you have a circle with a froth. That's the feminine symbol, but it's also the symbol of copper. And the reason why it's a symbol of copper is supposedly because where Venus was born was Cyprus, and that was an island rich in copper. So there's like all this historical shit with alchemy as a chemical, as a form of chemistry. So if you get into back to the shit, we were talking about why do you have to watch him boil shit
for a half hour? Yeah,
for half an hour. The alchemist, played by Jodorowsky in this film, is represented in the tarot by the magician. So the magician is the one who initiates the fool. The magician is, if the fool is card 0, the magician is card number 1. In the tarot, the magician, the iconography is that wizard, the magus, the magician has one hand up, pointed up, one hand pointed down. In alchemy, one of the principles is as above, so below. So it's a balance. Another alchemical principle is solve coagulum. So it's like you first divide, and then you bring together. So the idea of alchemy is supposedly that you had these chemists in medieval and ancient times, that their goal was to turn base metals like lead into precious metals like gold, and that they were looking for the philosopher's stone, and that they were trying to transmute. They were trying to take things that are impure, make them pure, and make them also precious. But that's the like the outer symbolic representation of that. What it really means is taking something that is just base, normal material, let's say like a human being, and transforming that human being with base consciousness, base impulses, base reactions, and turning that person's consciousness into a more enlightened state. So this is how it ties into ceremonial magic and old occultism of the court, which is to say that you're trying to evolve oneself from shit to gold in your consciousness, in your spirit. So it literally doesn't mean shit. But on some level it does, because it's like, well, our bodies right now contain shit. Our bodies are dying. Our bodies are rotting away. Our minds contain shit because they have all these elements of not impure thoughts in terms of like the way the church would describe impure thoughts, but impulses and thoughts that are reactions to shit that we're not in control of. Fears that we haven't addressed. Little habits that we haven't really looked at. So the reason why we're watching him turn shit into gold is because from alchemical perspective and from a high magic, so-called high magic or ceremonial magical perspective, we're watching the teacher show the initiate, this is you. We all start like this. But now you're on this quest to elevate yourself from these basic sets of thoughts into something much more nuanced, much more precious and higher. And that requires pressure.
Yeah.
And so that's the reason why. And the whole film is just the process of tackling those belief systems, the tower, ascending it, going through the levels of initiation like you do when you go up steps or in a tower to a higher consciousness. This is in different traditions, the tree of life and the Kabbalah. Going through the tunnel, breaking through that sheet is rebirth. Walking across their hall with the rainbow, like that Clint painting, that's the color spectrum that you see when you're born. You develop sight. There's a Tool song. It says, and it represents kind of this. It says, and it's doing the Fibonacci sequence. It says, black, then white are all I see in my infancy. Red and yellow then came to be. Reaching out lets me see. And so that's why it's the color spectrum. And we as humans can only see partial, and we can only hear partial. So it's a whole initiation ritual. It's a whole process. And so he's breaking it down using all of these elements that he's making into his fucking giant epic statement. So that ultimately you can get to the 9 masters. 9 is a number that has a lot of you have the Enneagram, which is popular at that time too. 9 different types, 9 angles, Circle of 9, Council of 9, Madame Blavatsky. Even the Nazis fucking believe that. We talked about this for, I think we might have talked about it for Indiana Jones. I think we also talked about it for Tibetan Book of the Dead with the I can't remember the name of that movie where the dude dies on drugs in Tokyo.
It was the Gaspar Noé
Into
film.
the Void?
Yeah, Into the Void.
Yeah. The point is that there were Nazis that also believed that there were, based on theosophy, that there were these Mahatmas that lived in the mountains, the Himalayas, that had these wisdom. There were these masters of wisdom, etc. So he's touching on all these things, but he's also criticizing, and he's saying, look, these masters of wisdom, they're mannequins. When they get to the base of the holy mountain, there are all these other gurus that are like, oh, look at my guru product, buy my guru product, and they're all charlatans.
Yeah.
So ultimately, Jodorowsky's going about it in a long-winded, dramatic way to say, because the beginning is you see a corrupt society, and then ultimately you see a corrupt society run by all of these rulers of industry, the cosmologist, beautician ruler, that represented by Venus, the planet, and the god of love, which represents vanity, superficiality, and it's the beauty industry. Weapons manufacturer, toy weapons, technocrats, the police state, corrupt urbanization. And my favorite line in the film, because it's funny, is because they have these vignettes about each of these rulers that are going to travel with the fool, the thief character. One of these rulers says, "We manufacture hypersexed brown native vampires that can only be destroyed by a cross the color of white skin."
Oh, Jesus Christ. Okay.
And it's a critique of society and of how fucked up. And I mean, this is a film from the early to mid 70s, which is a 50-year-old film, and it still holds up in terms of those critiques. The idea is understand, because there's also a depiction of, with chameleons and toads, the depiction of the so-called conquest of Mexico in the beginning. So the idea is like, we began in cultures and societies that are historically corrupt. Understand the history of your own environment. What we carry, those crosses, they're not only crosses, they're actual crosses with Christs on them as products, as mass-produced products. Like, we carry beliefs, identity, etc. that's passed down. They're not ours. So you have to determine to overcome those institutions and those beliefs. And with that, you have to understand that these luminaries of our society, these now, I mean, if he were to do it now, he would have the world of the Amazon, you know what I mean? And the Amazonian world, but it wouldn't be Amazonian the way that we think, or that we used to think of these Amazon warrior chicks. It would be Amazon as we know it now.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be Tesla, the inventor. It would be Tesla as we know it now. These would be, there are a cast of characters that you can draw from contemporary society to fit into that world that Jodorowsky creates. The idea is that these luminaries are corrupt and self-interested and just as lost themselves. And therefore they have to go on that journey too, because they don't even fucking like, they're trying to live up to their own bullshit too. So transform yourself and your consciousness from shit, base, mindless, reactive, to a higher state. But beware of the masters on the mountain, because they're empty as well. And beware of the cheap distractions on the way. And so by the end of the film, he says, we have obtained immortality. We have not obtained immortality. That was the original point, supposedly. But he's like, but at least we have obtained reality. So the idea is to go through all of these things so we can face a reality unclouded by our own bullshit. It's better to face it with like a mind that's more refined than a mind that's shit. And whatever you do when you reach these higher levels, you can't keep them in isolation on the mountain. You have to return to the world. The guy who wrote the book that this is based on was familiar with the teachings of another guru named Gurdjieff. So a lot of those influences come through this. It's a lot of like rehashed Eastern thought, but also with the idea of like, you can't do this in a monastery. You can't do this in some temple, like in a mountain. You have to do all the inner work in the world. So all of that shit that I just fucking like spilled out is this is my translation of Jodorowsky's translation of all these different ideas. So it sounds rather straightforward, and I think it is. But it's kind of, think of it like when you watch a Christopher Nolan movie, you're thinking like, oh shit, this is really, really kind of convoluted, or at least in the sense of like Inception, it has a lot of layers to it.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
And that it is, but at its most, at the core, the kernel of it is simple. It's just that journey, but with a lot of detail that Jodorowsky's putting into it, because he's using a lot of those symbols. He's translating a lot of that stuff. If you're familiar with it, you'll see it, but you don't have to be in order to get the premise.
No, see, a lot of it is there, and it's coming at you, and in some cases, I think a little bit of it is obvious, where the conclusions that you're going to get to, where the we are in charge of our own fate, and by the end, with uh, leave this movie, go live life, and all that. I mean, um. I think the problem is a personal problem. For the problem for me is a personal one, where I take issues with gurus of any type and leadership, because I feel that going on these journeys, I believe in the journey of self-discovery. I believe that those stories can be told and can be enlightening, but when you have the slow formation of a cult, which I see somewhat in this film, which is what I start to see with a guru that is leading. Um, there's a part of me, well, there's a very large part of me that feels like it betrays the individual. And as I watch it, I think a lot of the things that are being said in the film are kind of obvious, and then are exaggerated to a degree of, for example, there was a scene. There's a scene where they're climbing the mountain, and a woman is struggling to make it. I believe it was a black woman that was struggling to make it up the mountain, and I don't know if Jodorowsky, as the guru, starts yelling at her to rub your clitoris on the mountain, and I just thought that was all right. That's just ridiculous. Okay, I get what you're doing. I get what you're saying. But it goes into a weird world of um, sexualization that I don't necessarily think is pure to the story that's being told, and it's more of a glorification of the guru's power. What is Holodowski's character name in it? He's not the guru. He's something else. What is he called?
He's probably like the alchemist from Vegas or something like that.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, he starts off as the alchemist, but then he becomes like the leader, which is basically the guru, the Jim Jones, or whoever the fuck else you want to. My point is that those stories usually end badly, and they're usually somebody taking advantage of other people out there who have a weakness of the mind. At least as far as I'm concerned, when you're unable to when you're unable to make a decision, and you're being led in this manner that is depicted in this film, I question the intelligence of the character. However, uh, there are fair examples of that in real life, where people have given themselves over to a belief system that they believe is going to care for them, fulfill them. The question becomes, how much does Jodorowsky believe in this versus the the carny aspect of controlling people. See, I'm a pessimist and I'm a cynic when it comes to this kind of thing, so it's very difficult to sell out to that idea. But um, Jodorowsky Jodorowsky is a purely he's a pure visionary um, filmmaker, and I'm not saying visionary in the sense I'm not simply saying visionary as being able to see the potential of the medium or the artistic expression. I think it's both that, but it's also being able to challenge um, the viewer, and I think he does that more powerfully in El Topo and Santa Sangre. Now, when I looked in my records and saw when I saw this, we said 2018. I think I was blown away in that moment by my first encounter with Jodorowsky, and I think anybody who loves movies would be blown away. I think there are the majority of people the majority of people who would watch a Jodorowsky film, and this film in particular, would walk out of it either in the middle or at some point and saying, "What the fuck am I watching? What is this? Why?" Um, as much as I disagree with with a lot of the things that he's doing in the film, there's still a fascination with his method, with his skill as a visual storyteller, and so that's why I recommend the film. That's why I think it's a powerful statement, but it's also um, it's the it's the calling card of a great artist. And I think Jodorowsky is that artist. I think Jodorowsky is one of the great storytellers of cinema. Um, if you like David Lynch, this is on a whole other level of confusing storytelling, dreamlike imagery. Um, not all of it's going to work for everybody. Certainly, not a lot of this particular film worked for me. But the images that do work resonate, and I will be sitting with the film for quite a while. Just the opening of a man lying in the desert and his face covered with, what was it, ants? Was it ants?
Yeah, I think some kind of fire ants or some shit like
Hmm.
that. But the idea is, yeah, like it's going back to the idea of him being shit.
Yeah. I mean, it's a
Um,
powerful image, and it's a challenging image because you're asking yourself, well, what is this? Jodorowsky, more than any other filmmaker, seems to me somebody who is very much intentional with everything that you see on the screen. It's not
yes, yeah,
simply a man walking from one point to another. Um, if you watch a Hitchcock or a Spielberg or a Scorsese or a De Palma, or sometimes it's just a matter of pushing the scene forward. Somebody walking down the street. Maybe it's what you would consider B-roll footage, just the life of the city, the interaction of the person with it. Um, with Jodorowsky, he seems to be more of he seems to be more caught up in the idea of every moment of our life being some kind of spiritual statement, experience, something that can be related to an audience and elevate what
yeah,
you might dismiss as just living life. Every
right.
moment
And
is a little bit
that's
more powerful in a Jodorowsky film.
yeah, dedicating spiritual also. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, sure.
I mean, yeah, and it's an interesting point that you bring up because it's the idea of like it creates the or opens up that discussion of like guru versus guide. Um,
It's a good point. Yeah.
for example, like I can think of a few instances where it's like, well, take a Miles Davis.
Mm-hmm.
This is not this realm. This is a different realm. But Miles Davis would get young musicians that were on the rise, and he would say like, "All right, you're gonna play with my band," and they would make magic. And then once they were at the level where they were masters in their own right, he would kick them out of the group, and he would say, "Go fucking form your own band now. You've graduated. Go away." Even if there was potential for them to continue to make great things, he recognized that in his philosophy of constant motion and constant change, they had achieved their level of mastery, and now it was time for them to go off, and it was time for him. He would also change, and then he would bring in new people to represent that change, to basically, like, to a certain extent, feed off of their young new energy, but also guide them through whatever he was going through, knowing that they would be able to carry it. So in that sense, it's like, that's one way of looking at a guide. Or there's this idea of, and this is a popular book back in the day. It was called "If You Meet the Buddha on the Road, Kill It." And the idea is that you have to transcend your masters. And that comes from a Chinese Zen master, because Zen is the Japanese, but it traveled from India to China to Japan. Buddhism in general, but specifically Zen Buddhism. So Dhyana in India, Chan in China, and Zen in Japan, and then it comes to the U.S. In the middle of the 20th century. But that Master Lin Ji dude was the guy who was like, used to scream at his his students or whatever, and he was like, "Yeah, you're a shit stick," he would tell them. And he would say his teaching method was like, he would hit them with a stick and scream at them, and tell them these like koans or riddles, which popular culture seems to say that they are. It's like, what's the hand of one hand clap? What's the sound of one hand clapping in the koan? So there's supposed to be these things that will supposedly break your thinking mind, because they don't make sense. One of my professors, his theory was that they weren't so much that they were just kind of things that you say, that you repeat, that are part of the ritual of the Zen monastery. That they're little sayings that you pick up that become kind of greetings unto themselves. It's like the first rule of Fight Club is, and everyone knows what that is. And so if you greet someone and you say the first rule of Fight Club is, and then you can just smile and laugh and walk on, and now you know that we are in the same thing. The point is that that's another idea of like, you have to not attach yourself to the Buddha, because the Buddha, everything is transitory. Everything is passing away, including the Buddha nature. In shamanism, it's another one. If you want to do this like ayahuasca trip, and you want to do it correctly, you have to go to a shaman, because the shaman is the one who is from a long line of shamans who has the training and the knowledge of how to brew all of these things together to make it. If you go to, Leslie and I laugh because there are shamans in Guatemala, and they're part of a long tradition, and they're apprentices to older shamans. Now, this isn't Jim Jones isn't teaching these shamans, or some cult leader or whatever isn't teaching these shamans how to do their shit. It's an actual cultural practice um, that requires apprenticeship, because the role, going back to the beginnings of human society, like the the average tribal member was not a shaman. The average tribal member did whatever the fuck they did in the tribe,
Yeah.
and the shaman does shaman shit. You know what I mean? So, like,
Well,
if you
that's a whole discussion right there that we can veer off into, but I'm really interested in where you're
right,
taking this, so go ahead, please.
well, the point is that, like, the point is that going back to Guatemala, they have in certain, in one town, there's like very new agey people. All these tourists try to make it into like kind of like Bali, um, where it's all hippie and all this shit like that.
Mm-hmm.
And we've done cacao ceremonies and we've done all this stuff there. But we've always been like, we don't want to do shit with fucking shamans, you know? Like, we want um, we want to participate in things that are open to non-indigenous people.
Yeah.
Um, we don't want to participate in things that are not open, um, but we do want to participate in things that we can participate in, that we want to explore, and we want to do it through legitimate means with respect, not some fucking. It's not like I'm gonna go there and in 10 years I'm gonna be doing shaman bullshit, um, and and I'm gonna have Ibrahim's shaman show, and all it takes is $100 and you can come and trip balls with me on the fucking mountaintop. Um, no. So that's one where it's like it also requires that you basically need a master. You need Yoda to
See,
show you.
that's where it becomes problematic for me, because what I've noted, and I have an unhealthy disgust for American tourism, or American tourism culture, and
Mhm.
likewise anybody else who any group of people who fetishize and
Of course.
idealize another culture, seeking for the wisdom that they project onto that culture and what they think they're going to gain from it. Whereas, as far as I'm concerned, I would never do I would never participate in a sweat lodge, or a or any kind of a spiritual peyote, or any kind of, like Native American. And it's always Native American, almost inevitably Native American indigenous cultural practices that are supposed to bring you closer to nature and the warrior spirit, because I believe that, so number one, so much of that is fetishizing the culture, and it's usually done by opportunistic motherfuckers who are trying to take it. And good, good. Anytime that you can separate some rich cocksucker from his money, it's a good thing, as far as I'm concerned. Fuck them.
Yeah.
Let them believe. If Steven Seagal wants to believe that he's been anointed a spiritual reincarnation of a 19th century, 17th, 14th century Buddhist monk, or whatever, or whatever the Dalai Lama hoisted on him because of whatever donation, or who's the other guy, Richard Gere.
Hmm.
Good. Separate them from their fucking money. But if you are not from a culture and you weren't raised in it, and if you don't truly have that love and understanding for the self being raised in that, I don't think you can achieve it coming from the outside. You can study it to a degree, but you will never understand it in the way that being born into something and being raised with it for years. And I know this
Of
goes in
course.
contradiction to some of the cultural discussions that we've had, including the one we were having before we got on the microphone. But I think you have to. You can't just want to say, "I want to experience native culture." It can't be done. You because you fetishize it. You
Well, I
you
mean,
you know what I mean?
the if well, for example,
Hmm.
if because I as someone who travels,
Hmm.
I I agree with you to an extent, but then
Hmm.
there's also a part like I think you can experience different cultures. When you sit with those people and you eat with them and you eat their foods, you experience their culture.
The
Um,
difference of what I'm saying, though, I'm not okay. So the wording was wrong. To experience it to a degree where you believe you are now spiritually altered and on the same level as the people that you that live that world, that live that life. You can experience it and you can grow from under, but it all, for me, it's always a matter of recognizing that this is something that is unique to their world, their experience, their livelihood, their cultural upbringing, and a thing that I can only, eventually I'm going to hit a wall that I can only look over. I can never be that thing. And that thing is typically in American literature, whether it be Dances with Wolves,
yeah, sure.
Lawrence of Arabia, even adventure films like The Destroyer, Remo Williams, where you adapt somebody else's culture and you become that. That is a typical American um, fetishizing and we've talked about this in the past, recognition of, in particular, white America causing the evil throughout the world and yet being the only one that can save those cultures. That's where I have a
Yes,
problem.
I mean,
So,
yeah, for sure. But I think there are also I mean, you could see this in the way that a lot of these ideas that kind of created the backdrop for Jodorowsky in general. You can see, um, for example, in Zen or the ideas of Zen, a lot of times what Americans and what American culture kind of like takes from Zen is this idea of like that what appeals to Americans is this idea of like um, a sense of this vague freedom thing that comes from Zen, where it's like, oh, I'm free from stress, I'm free from this, I'm you're. It's not about tradition. It's just about freeing your mind. Um, even even Bruce Lee's rehashings of Taoism is very much like these interviews where he's like, "Free your mind, brother." Like, um,
yeah.
which I mean, of course, I mean, and but at the same time, there is something to that, and it parallels. I mean, it parallels Bob Marley saying "free mind," but at the same time, you have it's certain elements that yoga gets brought to the U.S. and then it becomes there's a documentary called Yoga Inc. Um, not INC. You know what I mean? Yoga
Hmm.
Incorporated because it becomes an industry, of course.
Yeah.
Um, and
And that's what I'm talking about. The
yes,
the capital is capitalizing, not capitalizing, but
but but
creating
they're
it with the
also,
embracing it with the capitalist mentality of
yes.
making it a
A
financially
commodity.
viable thing. Yes.
At the same time, there were people who brought yoga who said yoga is universal. Yoga is for everyone. Um, you don't have to be Indian to do yoga. You can benefit from yoga. Um, so, I mean, it's a constant struggle when it comes to things like that because it's like, if do you have to be black to play the blues? You know what I mean? Do you have to
Well,
be
that's interesting
Asian to
because
do
okay,
karate? You
let's
know what I
go
mean?
with
Like,
that. What's that?
I said for karate, like, okay,
Hmm.
like, or what about like Brazilian jiu-jitsu, where it's like it has this crazy the origins of jiu-jitsu in Japan going to Brazil, crazy story, and then the Gracies, and then all that shit, and
Hmm.
then it becomes uh, Dana White with the UFC and his fascist fucking nonsense, and
Yeah.
Joe Rogan. You know what I mean? It becomes all of that.
Yeah, but
Um,
that's the thing about that. I'm glad you brought that up because you're talking about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which is an evolution of um, a martial arts. I'm not an expert on this, so I can't say where it
right.
actually comes from.
Neither am I.
But you're talking about a fighting system, a physical activity that is built and has a foundation on a group of people of a certain body type, in which I mean um, height, weight, bone structure kind of thing, where we're typically smaller, thinner, and so the moves are different than somebody who would be a heavier person, a maybe naturally stronger. Whatever those moves that originated in that Asian culture would transform as whoever took it over. In this case, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It would it would evolve into something else that was more suited to that body frame. So it's no longer what it once was, although it has a foundation in Asian culture. You're not going to be able to get away from that, but it's no longer what it once was. And so, like with like religious movements, they all start off, or at least let's say Christianity, they all start off from a basic seed that grows into something that breaks off and becomes something different based on the needs of a handful of people that are directing it. Ultimately, what I'm talking about is
or interpreting it also.
or what, or interpreting
Yeah,
also. Yeah.
because you also, not to cut you off, but you also have you have people that um are constantly like any kind of, because it's all subculture shit.
Well,
Because
that's
it
the thing.
becomes
It's like,
like, well,
yeah, because I mean, look, I'm a Catholic, although I'm an atheist. Culturally, I'm a Catholic, and Catholics believe in saints. Now, if you talk to somebody who's a Protestant or a Methodist, they're going to say that's blasphemy to pray to a saint. You pray to the one and only true God. It's right there in the Ten Commandments. Thou shalt have no other gods
yeah,
before me. Um,
Trump 2517, you know,
yeah. So yeah,
that
but
the righteous, you know.
yeah, but if you talk to a Catholic, we're not speaking to a saint in the same way that we're speaking to God. It's
Yeah,
almost like,
veneration versus worship.
yeah. So it's they're the the matter of interpretation and evolution of religion comes into play there. The point of it is, yes, you have interpretation, but you also have Henry VIII, who gets tired of being married to this bitch because she can't give him a son, and he breaks out from the Catholic Church and forms, what did he form?
Anglicanism, Church
Okay,
of England.
the Church of England. So, you know, the point is like, you will have people who will attempt to destroy and or subvert what they
Poison and destroy
know.
my brothers.
Was that?
To poison and destroy my brothers.
Yes. Yes. And so, like, for me, it's a lot of cultural appropriation.
Yeah,
but
sure.
it's a matter of like, I have done yoga, but I don't look at yoga as a spiritual thing. Although I
But see,
recognize the spiritual aspect of it in its
yeah,
original, but I'm not studying yoga that way. I got my back hurts. That's all I care about.
okay.
I'm not
But there's
namasteing
someone
everybody
who's
at the
gonna be
end.
like, someone who's gonna be like, your back hurts, go to fucking chiropractor, motherfucker. Like,
And I do
don't
that
do
too.
that to
So
yoga.
it's like,
Don't reduce it. Don't reduce it to your little health benefit, asshole.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
You're gonna have both sides, and then you're gonna have persons
Sure.
that says like, listen, you don't need to see it as spiritual. The byproducts of it themselves are spiritual.
Mhm.
Do it because you need to do it or you want to do whatever. Go for it. Again, yoga is universal. Some people will say.
Mhm.
I've done a sweat lodge. I had a professor who invited me to one, and we discussed the appropriateness of me participating in it. And she said, "I'm inviting you to it, and you're not going in there with a clipboard. Like participate in this. Like, if you're interested, you're more than welcome." I did it, and it wasn't just limited to, because this is also another element that we do a lot of times in so-called Western culture, is that we divide one thing between the spiritual realm
Mhm.
and and the mundane realm. And I think Jodorowsky is also pointing to this through going back to Gurdjieff. Is he's saying it's all the same shit, quite literally at its most base. So that it's not necessarily this is spiritual and this is, spiritual begins when you step into the church. No. To some people, it's the way that, for example, like, you're a creative person. I'm a creative person.
Mhm.
Creativity doesn't just start when you sit at a typewriter or you get on stage or you pull out your easel or you fucking tune your guitar, take it out of the case. Creativity is when you're dreaming, when you're asleep. Creativity is when you're making love. Creativity is when you're cooking. Creativity is when everything. And even for non-create, so-called like non-artists or whatever, people are engaging in creativity all the time when they're saying like, "Fuck, how do I get out of this? Shit, this looks like traffic. I'm gonna turn off and go this way." That's creativity. We're creative beings. In that same sense, like, some people would argue that we're spiritual beings. Not everyone. Some people are like straight up materialists. That's fine. The point is that it's like there's always going to be that tension between um, the going back to the film, whether it's something that is political versus spiritual, something that is mundane versus spiritual, something that is the guru saying, "Beware of gurus," but I'm going to tell you, don't take advice from people, but take my advice. Don't take advice from people. Um, you know what I mean? Like, so
Sure.
do you take that advice? Because that's advice.
Yeah.
So it's self-negating, but at the same time, the paradox is that it's good advice. And it becomes Leonard Cohen, follow me, the wise man said, but he walked behind. He has a song called Teachers. He goes through this in that song. He goes through this whole process of all these things that happened to him, and then he's taken on this journey. I met a woman long ago. Her hair was black. The black can go. Are you a teacher of the heart? Soft. She answered no. I met a girl across the sea. Her hair was gold. The gold could be. Her hair was gold. That gold could be. Are you a teacher of the heart? Yes, but not for thee. So he goes through this whole process of all this shit, including several girls embraced me. Then I was embraced by a man. Is my passion perfect? No, do it once again. He's exploring. He's doing all this shit. By the end, he's with the guru, and he says, "Teacher, are my lessons done? I cannot do another one." He laughed and said, "Well, child, are your lessons done?" So there's that side of it, but then there's also the Fight Club side of it, where it's like, well, Killer Durden becomes a guru, and he becomes this leader, and then people die, and bad shit happens. You know what I mean? Like, and I think there is that genuine struggle between these extremes of, at what point, when we are all on our journey, like, yes, you have to do the journey on your own, but sometimes we do need help, or we do need an example, or we do need someone to say, like, all right, this is what I did when I was in a similar situation. It may not work for you, but it worked for me. And what you're doing, I tried it. And this is what happened to me. And so there's something for that as well. And that's part of, I think, the film, where when they get to the mountain and they get to a certain point, and he's like, okay, like, you don't need me anymore, cut my head off. Because we get so caught up in, it's that cliche of, oh, it's not the destination, it's the journey, bullshit, right? And there are all these levels that you get to. That, think about any job you've had when you start off versus when you reach a level of, like, not only proficiency, but when you reach a certain level of mastery.
Yeah.
And then you see the new guy, and you see yourself in that person. Hopefully you haven't forgotten where you came from, but you see yourself in that. If you're a manager, yeah, you've forgotten where you came from.
You've forgotten,
not always, but
most of the time, yeah.
But you see the new person, and it's like, do you step in and let them fuck up, or step in and say, hey, like, I'm gonna save you time, or do you let them fuck up so that, like, they can learn that process? You know what I mean? And is that person gonna be like, man, fuck you? Like, they may not say it, but internally, are they gonna be like,
yeah,
I'll figure it out. I don't need you. You know what I mean? I'm Gen Z. I don't need you. I'm just gonna say it.
And you take a step back and let them fuck up as bad as they need to.
And it's like, in a certain sense, we're guides in this show, because we are guiding people through our experiences on our fucking cinematic shit, and the person can take it or leave it. And you know that not everyone's fucking agreeing with us all the time.
Well, we're long-winded and pretentious, so the attitude is going to be out there. All we can do is really talk about all we can do is talk honestly about the way we feel about a thing. I don't My attitude has changed about this movie, obviously, watching it now and our discussion 7 years ago. But there is an even stronger there is an even stronger love, respect, and admiration for what Jodorowsky does, because even with a movie like this, where it doesn't resonate the way it did then, I still see the power of one man's vision. And let's be honest, this is one man. Even
Hmm.
if he's coming from an outside source material, I find it difficult to imagine that what you're watching on that screen isn't wholly Jodorowsky. And I started to talk about watching him in Jodorowsky's Dune. He makes you want to love, he makes you love storytelling. If you watch that film, that's one of the few times where I would say, if I were to dive in, if I were to do a deep dive into Jodorowsky, that's the film that I would start with, because there's such a passion for the man, and it's much different than of course Quentin and his bullshit. Um, it's you have a Scorsese who has a passion and a love for cinema, but it's grounded in an academic understanding. There's an academic understanding. Jodorowsky is almost pure love of the image and storytelling and the power of being able to create something, shoot it, and present it. He's one of the few
Hmm.
directors that I can say I watch with the excitement of somebody who truly loves what they're doing and is doing so because they need to exercise these images from their soul. I mean, that's what I feel with the Jodorowsky. I feel that he is genuine in of every aspect of what makes an artist great. Jodorowsky is that. And the film might
Yeah,
have
especially
problems, but it's still an amazing statement.
you remind me that, like, and it's not him being extreme for the purposes of being extreme. He's extreme, but
Absolutely, yeah.
he doesn't know any other way to be.
Hmm. It's not a show. I mean, film by nature is a show, but it's not to affect you in the manner of look how smart I am or look how much I know. He just wants you to see what he sees. And that's the best
Yeah,
kind of filmmaking. It's a it's a it's not a condescending film. He's not a condescending filmmaker. And he would have, if anybody has the right to be condescending, I think it would, or if anybody is likely to be condescending, it would be him. But he's not. He wants you, or at least the way I see it, he wants you to see what he loves, what motivates him. And I'm ready to go on that journey with him. I think I have maybe 3 more movies of his that I have to see. The Dance of Reality, and I think there's one more movie that he did a few years back.
there's Tusk.
There's Tusk. Tusk?
I think that's the one about the elephant.
I haven't seen that. Okay, I didn't know about that.
And then
There's one called Fernando and Liz, I think. I think that's his
oh, that's
first film.
his first one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I haven't seen that.
Um, you have or you haven't.
I haven't. I haven't.
And then there's the later ones, Dance of Reality, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's one or two more after that that are related to it.
Yeah.
They're autobiographical.
Yeah. Well,
I saw one of them at the with some friends at the Silent
mm-hmm.
when that was still open. So that was cool because I saw Jodorowsky's Doom, a documentary at the silent movie theater as well.
Mm-hmm.
Before that got me tooed out. And so yeah, he's unique, and that's what we need. We need unique. We
Yeah.
need where you say, that's that film. It's like when musicians, you could hear them and say, that's fucking that's 9 Inch Nails or whatever the fuck
Yeah.
it is, and that sounds like that. You know what I mean? And even if filmmakers do similar shit, you know that there's Fellini and Jodorowsky intersect at certain places, but at the same time, you're like, no, that's Fellini.
Yeah.
And we need that. We need individual voices doing their own fucking extreme shit.
Yeah. No, you're right.
So the Holy Mountain is a fucking trek. Enjoy it. Enjoy the ocelot breasts of the old bearded, frontally nude naked man. buymeacoffee.com/watchRickRamos. buymeacoffee.com/watchRickRamos. Thanks to everyone who donates, all the members. If you want to support us, this is a labor of love. Help us out. Keep listening. Keep turning your shit into gold whenever you can. Goodbye.